Hey, thanks for joining us here on the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Fore. I really appreciate you coming back for episode 17. Hard to believe we got this many in the can, so to speak. But hey, I'm really excited about episode 17. We're going to be checking in with head football coach Lamont Butler at Trinity International University. We'll be checking in with him first. And then after that, we'll be going to an interview I did with Kirby Bradley. Kirby Bradley is the director and producer of Seaus. Seaus is the life story of Junior Seau told through a 30 for 30 film. Came out on yesterday. Well, not yesterday to all of you, but I digress. 30 for 30 Seaus came out on September 20th, 2018. September 20th, 2018. And as I said, it's about the life and death of Junior Seau, former San Diego Charger legend, NFL Hall of Famer. Junior and I were born in the same city, 5 or 6 years apart, Oceanside, California. And so I was fortunate enough to meet Junior a few times. One of those times was through a phone call. When I was 16 years old, I was in a car accident. I'm going to put the story in the show notes here for today. But I was in a car accident when I was 16. Junior knew a friend of mine, Don Bale, through business. And Don asked Junior to call me because I was at the end of my rope in a lot of ways. I was in a very bad car accident between my sophomore and junior year. My friend driving was killed. We were on our way home from church, hit a telephone pole going way too fast. And I said Justin, who was driving, was killed right that day. And I spent about 20 days in the hospital, and my football career was over. And as you can imagine, a 16-year-old kid sitting in a hospital bed at home, all his buddies are at football, all his buddies are enjoying summer. It was a very difficult summer, July of 1992. Junior Seau was in his third year, I believe, maybe just his second in the NFL, and absolutely tearing it up for our hometown, San Diego Chargers. So Don, my friend, asked Junior to give me a call to encourage me. He did that. Junior called me one night. It was a Tuesday evening, and I'll never, ever forget that 15-minute phone call. In a lot of ways, it really did change my life because he inspired me to find a way. Even, he said to me, even if you're in a wheelchair, which I was for about half that season, he said, even if you're in a wheelchair, you need to find a way. Find a way to contribute because the Fallbrook Warriors need Chris Fore. And he said to me, a team is a team is a team. With 1 or with 60, you are a part of that team. So quit feeling sorry for yourself that you can't play. You need to find a better way to contribute. Junior was an electrifying person. Again, that phone call inspired me. It made me excited for football again. He made me think, how can I contribute to this team this year? I went on that year. I won the DeNormandy Award. It's an award given to the most inspirational player. And I won that my junior and senior year of our varsity football team. I didn't play a down. And then my senior year, I started coaching the freshman football team. And as they say, the rest of the story was written after that. I ended up coaching 17 years of football. So, I put it all on that phone call with Junior on a Tuesday in July when I was in a hospital bed, when I was depressed, when I was feeling sorry for myself, when I thought my football career was over. And he said this to me. He said, Chris, your football playing career might be over, but your football career might not be. And that was tremendous. Well, as you know, the story of Junior Seau, he killed himself about, I believe it was 2012, about 6 years ago. I'll never forget where I was when that happened. Junior later that year had me down to a practice in San Diego. So I got to meet him in person, spend some time with him at the Chargers facility there at Jack Murphy Stadium where they used to practice. And just a tremendous man. So I was really saddened to hear that. I didn't believe it when I first read that news. I'll talk about that a little bit here on the podcast with Kirby. But anyhow, I wrote that story after he died. I wrote a story for my website called The Night Junior Called Me. Kirby found that in his research of Junior's life. He found that online, and he included me in the film. I got an email one day, hey, this is a 30 for 30 producer. I'm putting together a story on Junior Seau. I'd love to interview you about the time you met him. So that was really cool. It was really neat to be a part of that. I went down to San Diego where he filmed for 2 hours one night. He just filmed me and asked me a whole bunch of questions and asked me about meeting him and asked me about different points of his career. Hey, do you remember this night? So that was pretty cool, and it was fun this past Wednesday, the 12th of September 2018 here. We got to go down to Burbank and see that film released to a private group of about 50 or so people, some of Junior's family and some Chargers and stuff who were in it. It was a really cool night for myself and my son, my 11-year-old son. I took him, and then my parents. So the movie's amazing. I encourage you to watch it if you're a football fan. It's going to make you think. You know, I've been very critical on Twitter and on some articles I've written about the media and the hate for football that I really believe is out there, and the use of CTE to ban football. I've been very outspoken against that because I really believe the science is inconclusive. And I'm not a denier. Absolutely. I agree. There is CTE. It's a scientific fact that there is a brain disease. It's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I think the E I got, maybe not. I might have messed that up. But there is CTE. The prevalence in it in football players, in contact sports players, is what I think really needs to be studied, because we've seen too many of these cases and these studies. You know, it came out, I think, the 2017 season, 110 of 111 NFL football players found to be with CTE. I mean, that study is so bogus because it's slanted in a way where all those brains, they thought that those people had brain issues anyway, okay? I'm not a scientific guy, but that study and many others that have come out over the years have been very biased. And like I'll hit on it real brief in this podcast, but like I told my son the other night, until they take 50 brains of contact sports or 50 brains of NFL players and do a study on those guys and find out, okay, 47 of this 50 have CTE, and then you take another group of 50 brains, a control group who had zero contact sports experience, zero combat experience, and you take those and you say, okay, we only had 3 out of these 50 have CTE. Well, now I think you've got a real serious problem on your hands, right? Because you've got a control group showing 3 of 50, just the regular people, and you've got NFL players or contact sports showing 47 out of 50. Now you've got a much more serious issue, and I wish that type of study would be funded. I think we all know why it hasn't been. But anyway, that's, a little bit of what I wanted to say. But this movie is thought-provoking because it does show Junior, it shows his life go through a dramatic change. And we're going to talk about that here, but I'm real excited to have Kirby Bradley on. Kirby, thank you again for your time to put this together. Coach Butler, thank you for your time to come on and share with us a little bit each week about being a head football coach at the college level. Folks, enjoy this podcast. It's one of my favorite ones I've done yet, this interview with Kirby Bradley about the making of Seaus. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it. All right, we're here today with Kirby Bradley, the director and producer of one of the latest 30 for 30s to come out just yesterday. Some of you may have seen it already. If not, you might this weekend. It's called Seaus, dynamite documentary on the life and death of Junior Seau, a guy grew up idolizing as a San Diego native. So I've asked Kirby to join us here. I got to know him through being a part of this project briefly for a few hours. We sat and talked about some of my experiences as a San Diego Charger fan and how I happened to receive a call from Junior one night as a 16-year-old kid after a car accident. And I'm going to put a link to that story specifically in the show notes. Not going to talk about that here. But Kirby, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, so congratulations. I know I can't imagine how big of a deal it is to finally get a huge project like this in the can, so to speak. Congratulations on the release of this film this week.
Thank you very much. It does feel great. It's been a long time. I've been working on this for a long time, so it's wonderful to finally see it come out and be available to the public for sure.
Yeah, so Kirby, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know just, through IMDb, you've done, many sports documentaries, done some stuff with Real Sports, Bryant Gumbel. Tell us a little bit about your background in the movie making, documentary making space.
Sure. Well, this is my first 30 for 30 for ESPN. I worked for a long time at HBO where, as you mentioned, I did a lot of sports documentaries on people like Sonny Liston, Sugar Ray Robinson, Howard Cosell, Joe DiMaggio, the 1980 U.S. hockey team. And some of those I directed, some I oversaw as a supervisor. But I also helped create Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel, the news magazine series. And I ran that show for, I guess, about 17 years. And during the course of that show, we did several stories about CTE, the brain disease that we're finding more and more football players suffer from. And that was part of the reason I was interested in this project. And when I decided to start my own little production company, that was one of the projects I had in mind to do.
Yeah, so at what point you make a documentary? I mean, most of us here listening are going to have zero clue what this is like, and it's fascinating to me. At what point does a documentary turn into, an official 30 for 30 production? Because there's no doubt the 30 for 30 series on ESPN are a must-see, must-watch TV for coaches. How does that happen?
Yeah, I can't speak for all of them because, as I said, this is my first one.
Yeah.
I think that most of them, it works kind of like this. You pitch the idea to the folks at ESPN's 30 for 30 group. They have a specific group who do these films. And if they like the idea, they may give you a little bit of money to develop it further, or if they think it's ready to go, they will green light it and they'll discuss a budget with you. And once the budget is agreed upon, then they'll actually fund the making of the film. That's the way it was in my case. I can't say it's that way in every case, but in my case, we agreed upon the budget, and then they started paying my company to make the film. And they had input all along the way. They've got people who look at preliminary cuts, and then they provide notes on what they think could be changed or improved. And so it's a collaborative process along that way.
Yeah. Okay. So, and Do you know how many projects, they look at for every one that they accept?
I don't, but I'm sure it's many, many, many. I'm sure they get dozens and dozens more pitches than they actually put into production. So to get one okayed is really exciting for me, and I'm really happy that they chose to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that. So you talked a little bit. I was real curious about that funding, how that works. I know a lot of folks in film and art have to do a whole lot of that on their own. So I'm glad you're able to, get that secured for a project like this. How long does that take? I mean, you got the idea, and we'll talk about what inspired you to make this one on Junior Seau, but how long does it take for a 30 for 30 like this from, the idea comes in your head to the premiere of it?
Yeah. Well, again, every project is different, but I can tell you specifically on this one, I had the idea sometime in the middle of 2015. In October of 2015, I reached out to Sydney Seau, who is Junior's daughter, and I reached out to her because she had given his speech when he was accepted into the Hall of Fame. So I just assumed that she was some sort of spokesperson for the family, and she responded to me, and we ultimately talked on the phone and then met in person, and then she put me in touch with her mother, who was Junior's wife for 10 years, and so forth and so on. And they really kind of opened up a lot of the doors. And once I had the family on board, that's when I started pitching it to various places. And I pitched it to a lot of places. But ESPN was the one that seemed to be the best fit, and so that's where it ended up. But, we're almost 3 years later now. So we actually started real production right around the beginning of the year 2017, where we started actually shooting interviews and gathering footage and so forth. So that's more than a year and a half ago. And I'd say that's probably about typical for most documentaries of this length. Some of them can take, 5 years, and others are put together in a matter of 6 months or so. But it's a long process any way you look at it.
Yeah, definitely. About 3 years, like you said, from idea to production here. I know I met you in December. I believe it was December of 2017 when we filmed my segment down there in San Diego. So was it real important for you to get Junior's, immediate family, his children? If Sydney would have told you, no, we're not interested, would you have still pursued it? What's that like?
I don't know for sure, but I probably would have not pursued it at that time.
Yeah.
And the reason is that, to me, this story was Junior's story, obviously, about how he changed throughout his life, and by the end, he'd become a very different person than he had. But he's not here to tell it. So I knew that the impact that change had on his family would resonate with people. So once I knew that I had his 4 children on board and his former wife, and then his close business manager, Betty Hoffman, who he called Mom, that's how close they were. Once they were all on board, I felt pretty sure that I would have a good chance of making this story impactful and emotional. Without them, I could have told it. I could have told the facts, but I don't know that it would have had the same impact emotionally that it has with them included.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we'll get into that. I got one more question. We're going to get into why Junior here. So how many hours of film did you get? It looks like you guys filmed for more than a year.
Yeah.
When you put something like this together, how many hours of film is it? Or do you have any idea?
I've never counted it up, but I know.
Yeah.
The interviews alone, the interviews I did with people, we've probably got about, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 hours.
Wow.
Of interviews, and then on top of that, of course, there's just hours and hours and hours of game footage and home movies and news footage of Junior and many, many photos. And when people hear that, it's just hard to explain why you need that much. But the fact is, you're looking for the best of the best. And when you do an interview for an hour and a half with someone, at the end of the day, there may be only 5 or 10 minutes that's really good. And then when you match that up with all the other interviews you've got, even of that 5 and 10 minutes of really good stuff, you're only going to end up using 4 or 5 because other people might even say it better than they do, and so forth and so on. And same with the game footage. You're trying to whittle it down so that you're using just the best of the best, and it requires a lot of footage to end up with just an hour and a half worth overall.
Yeah, and how long was it?
How long was the final film?
Yeah, how long is the film?
It's I think it's 88 minutes.
Okay.
It's not exactly 88, but it's right around 88 minutes. So basically an hour and a half.
Yeah, I got to go watch it last week, and my son asked me afterwards, "How long was that, Dad?" I didn't even know. I mean, guys, this, and I'm not saying it because Kirby's on with me here, but I've been telling everybody since Wednesday. I was able to see it this past Wednesday. It's and again, I'm biased because Junior was I really grew up. We were born and raised in the same city down there in North San Diego County, and so he was like a hero to me. So I'm biased in that way. But this film is very, very well done, and just I'm a huge. If I had an hour to watch TV, I'd watch a documentary. That's the type of guy I am. I'd rather watch a documentary than a live football game a lot of times, to be honest with you. Real history type of guy, and this documentary is fantastic. So it felt like 15 minutes to me, Kirby. I mean, I
love to hear that, Chris. Trust me.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to hear is that, well, it felt really long. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I brought my 11-year-old son there, as you know, to watch it with me, be a part of that. And he was born in Oceanside back in 2006. The cinematography, I assume through drones.
Yep.
Yeah, the cinematography of Oceanside was dramatic, was amazing. My son even said when he was a little kid, he's 11 now, so probably 8 years ago, 8 years ago, we used to go, kind of had this Saturday morning tradition. We'd go to a donut place, and then I'd take him down to a place, a little park on the beach in Oceanside. And he said, "Dad, I saw the donut place we went to, and hey, that's where we used to go play on the beach." And I mean, the footage, the aerial footage of Oceanside was tremendous. So yeah, thanks for sharing, kind of laying out how you guys go about making a documentary like this. That's really fascinating for just a little coach, here. So I gotta ask, like, why Junior? Why Junior Seau? You mentioned it a little bit with the CTE. Were you a Charger fan at all, or?
Well, sort of. I lived in San Diego for a little bit after college, and not to date myself, but this was back when Junior was still in high school, and I didn't know anything about him, but I had a roommate who was a sports reporter for the San Diego Union, and he was assigned to North County Sports. And he came back one night raving about this basketball player, this huge Samoan kid that he had seen playing basketball.
Wow.
And I didn't, I promptly forgot about it. But then when Junior had his breakout year at USC, I started thinking, I wonder if that's the same guy. And sure enough, when I checked it out, it was.
Wow.
So then when he was drafted by the Chargers, I was excited about that. I wasn't living there anymore, but I always was interested in his career. And then when he started playing in the NFL, I just loved his style, just that joyous approach to the game, and always smiling and just enthusiastic, and I love that style. So I always liked him, and I always followed him, and was surprised when the Chargers let him go, and then couldn't believe that he was still playing when the Patriots picked him up. But Belichick always did that with all those wily old veterans.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of frittered away and didn't really hear much, but then I heard about the car crash over the cliff, and then ultimately when he took his own life, and it was just so shocking. It just didn't add up. It didn't make any sense. And I wanted to explore. I thought it would make a great film to just explore with those around him, how he changed and why that was. And there are no hard answers in these kinds of stories, but I knew it would be interesting to delve into it and to explore why.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the way his life ended was tragic. My wife and I were actually out in Las Vegas on a little getaway weekend, or a week. I think it was do you recall, was it a Wednesday when he killed himself?
I believe it was a Wednesday.
Yeah,
May 2nd.
Yeah, I think we were out there for 3 days, and I was sitting poolside scrolling on my phone, and I could not believe it when I saw that headline. I mean, I had to check a few different websites, and I sat there and got teary-eyed.
So many people say the same thing, Chris, that they saw it, couldn't believe it. They had to check other people. They had to call people. Is this true? I mean, how could that be? Because, like you said, it's just he was the last guy you would expect to take his own life, and so it was such a shock.
Absolutely. What is? Let me ask you this. I was really, really surprised, and I cannot remember her name. I was really surprised that his girlfriend, who found him dead in that Oceanside beach house, I was really surprised that you were able to get her on this. I had not seen any kind of interviews or read any interviews out there over the years from her. How did you track her down, and had you seen her in the media at all?
No. Jim Trotter, the NFL reporter, wrote a book about Junior, and she talked to him a little bit right at the end of his writing process. So he didn't get her into the book very much, but she did start to open up with him. But then by the time I did the film, which was probably a year or so later from Jim, well, it's interesting. There are three women in the film: Gina, his former wife, Betty Hoffman, who is his business manager, and Megan, his last girlfriend. And you would expect these women to have reasons not to like each other, because when Gina was getting divorced from Junior, Betty was on Junior's side because she was with him as his manager.
Yeah.
Megan obviously was one of the girlfriends after Gina was divorced from him. But it's interesting that after Junior's death, these three women came together and started talking with each other and have become really close friends. So once Gina agreed to do the film, Junior's former wife, she put me in touch with Betty, who agreed to do it because Gina had done it. And then they put me in touch with Megan, who, well, she did not immediately agree to do it. It took a few months of convincing. But she did it because Gina and Betty did it. There's no way I would have been able to convince her without them. And she just, she felt it was time to tell her story. She knew it was going to be incredibly painful to do it.
Yeah.
And it was a tough interview, but I mean, you can probably see that she'd been crying through most of it, but she did it, and it was powerful to see and to hear. And I really admire her and everyone in the film who dealt with Junior and had those difficult moments with him. No one as difficult as that, obviously, but I really admire everyone who is willing to bare their souls and talk about those moments with him where he just wasn't acting right,
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for them.
Oh, she's very. I mean, I was blown away when she showed up on there, and that very courageous young lady for talking to you, like you just said. And do you think that, I'm asking you to speculate a little bit, but do you think those three women kind of came together to compare notes and to try to help them find out answers on what happened?
Well, no question. I mean, I can't remember if this is the exact phrase they used, but they have so much in common because they all went through the Junior experience.
Yeah.
They put it like that, somehow like that. And meaning the great Junior experience.
Yeah.
Where, the good Junior who was so loving and fun and just brought so much joy and happiness into a room, just lighting a room up with a smile and making everyone feel like they are the most important person in his life. But all three of them saw the Junior that changed, and how he could be cold and he could be so unpredictable and lashing out. And so they witnessed it all. And so they feel they have this bond, and it took them a while to figure that out. But once they did, even though they had, different competing interests in his life, once he was gone, they had so much in common that they really drew strength from each other. So it's really interesting. They're just great friends now.
Yeah, that's good to hear that they are good friends. And it's almost, as you were talking, it's almost like you have these three women are like before, during, and after. You've got that first wife before he was, really Junior Seau famous, and then Miss Hoffman in between, and then and then the girlfriend there at the end. Sadly, was that your hardest interview in this film? The girlfriend?
I think so. I think that's fair to say. I mean, it was hard to talk to the family too, because they're the ones who experienced the death the closest.
Sure.
So talking to Gina, talking to Tyler and Jake and Sydney and Hunter, the children, and just asking them, okay, describe that day. It's a terrible question to ask somebody.
Yeah.
They knew I was going to ask it, so they were prepared for it. But you could just sense the pain and how difficult it was to bring that moment back when they first heard that their father was dead. And then the days following when they were just trying to make sense of it all. And then people were calling to, ask if they could take his brain from his body, essentially.
Wow.
Which is imagine that request.
Yeah.
You've just lost your father, and then these people you don't even know want to harvest his brain. So it was a really, really hard time. And to have them sit in front of me telling me that, seeing that raw emotion and how hard it was for them to do that, those were hard.
Yeah.
But I think Megan's was probably the hardest because, it's just unimaginable to come upon that scene the way she did and find him and then having to deal with that. So, yeah, I would say that was the hardest one.
Yeah, I was able to meet, and I spoke briefly with his son Jake and daughter Sydney the other night. Just tremendous people. I love what Sydney Seau is doing here. She wants to bring the CTE, concussion education, to high schools. We spoke briefly about that, and I'm excited to see what she does in the future there. So you, kind of to backtrack a little bit, you talk with Sydney, you get that family permission. What's your next step? I mean, how do you storyboard this? How did you go about deciding how to make this documentary?
Yeah, the next step is to also, call a lot of other people to try to line up the other interviews that I felt I would need for this. And that it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of convincing. But again, having the family on board helped a great deal in that process. But yes, at the same time, I was also laying out, I had a rough idea of the story I wanted to tell it and how I wanted to tell it. But part of the process then is to make that more detailed and just kind of figure out, at which part in the process you're going to introduce different parts of the story. And that always changes, even after you start shooting and start doing interviews and then start editing it. Sometimes it just doesn't work the way you envisioned it, and you then move things around again later in the process. But it's an ongoing process, and it's always changing and evolving.
One of the parts of the movie that I think was really stirring and was emotional was when you introduced the journals that Junior kept. And I very artistic how you brought those on and off the screens. And is it Hunter, his son?
No, that was Jake who read those.
Jake who read those. Was Hunter the one there the other night?
Yeah, Hunter was at the screening. Yes.
Okay, Hunter.
Not Jake.
And Jake was not. Okay.
Yeah.
Hunter's who I met.
Correct.
So when you had Jake read those journals, and that was amazing. How did you come across, if you can't share, I understand that as well, but how did you come across his written journals?
Well, again, I think Jim Trotter, he had seen those, and he included a couple excerpts in his book on Junior Seau. So I knew they existed, and I found them from one of the family members.
Okay.
It's unfortunate from a filmmaker's standpoint that there weren't more of them, because only a few pages of Junior's journal survived. No one really knows where the other ones were, whether he just had thrown them away or someone may have tossed them after his death. But there were a few that survived, and they were, yeah, it was. I mean, I almost couldn't believe it the first time I read them, because
yeah,
one thing I found out early about Junior and this was a big challenge for making the film, is Junior did not reveal much of himself to even those closest to him. And this is not uncommon, I think, for football players and tough guys. But you're always a leader. People look up to you. You can't show vulnerability because you are the leader. And that carries over into our personal lives. And that was the way with Junior. He rarely, let on to anyone, even, his wife or his children or his close friends, that he had doubts, that he had weaknesses, that he had struggles. But in those journals, he let it pour out. And the first time I read them, I couldn't believe it. This is like, wow. But virtually nobody who knew him in real life saw that side of him. So it was really key that we found those and that we were able to use them, because without them, we would have just been guessing at the things that were going through Junior's head.
Yeah, like I said, those were powerful. And if you haven't seen this movie, folks, you've got to check it out. If you're a football fan, if you're a Junior Seau fan, for sure. It's already out, came out. This podcast comes out on September 21st. So it debuted yesterday, the 20th, on the ESPN Plus platform. Yeah, and, Jim Trotter's a great man. We've spoken a few times. And I read his book, but for whatever reason, Kirby, the journals didn't come. Like I didn't even remember those were in there, But now watching those parts on film, I won't forget it. It's interesting, right?
Well, it's funny. We went back and forth, and my executive producer Ezra Edelman, who's a great filmmaker, and he made the O.J. Simpson documentary on ESPN that won the Oscar. He and I went back and forth, and he lobbied to not have a voice, reading the journals, just to show them on screen. He thought that would be more powerful. I felt pretty strongly that having a voice, in addition to the handwriting and in addition to type, where that's easier to read, I just felt those were so important. I didn't want to risk anyone not really receiving the impact of them. So I insisted that we use a voice, and I tried different things. And I had assumed that Jake was familiar with the journals because, like I said, they were in the book. I did the interview with Jake at Duke University, where he's a student. He's a lacrosse player there. And in the middle of the interview, I said, your dad did journals, I'm pretty sure. And he said, no. And I said,
wow.
Well, yeah, I've got a few excerpts here. Would you be willing to read these and then just, give me your reaction? He said, yeah, sure. And I don't think he knew what that was going to do to him, because if you don't know about it, you don't expect to read that kind of stuff. So it was obviously emotional for him, but I felt like, again, there was a little bit of rawness there that surprised me, but it made the impact of those journals even stronger to hear him reading them and then reacting to them.
Those were some of the most poignant parts of the entire film, in my opinion, without a doubt. Yeah, it was. There was a short panel after the film the other night when it debuted, and Kirby shared that, and I was blown away. That this young man Jake had never read these before, and those parts are heartbreaking. Do you know if those journals, Kirby, were those written during his playing days or after?
I believe they were written during his playing days, which was interesting to me because, when you read them, you think, well, that must have been the last day of his life.
That's what I thought.
They sound so desperate and so sad, yet they weren't. The ones that survived, I believe, were from when he was still playing. So it was, at least a couple of years, if not more, prior to his death. So yeah, we can only assume, but it's logical that what he was going through closer to his death was, if anything, more severe than those things that he was writing in his journals.
Yeah. Wow. One of the one of the journal entries that Jake read was, about how somebody always wants something from him. And I think that is something a lot of famous people and or rich people are dealing with all of the time. In fact, sitting right in front of me the other night was Marcellus Wiley, one of those guys. Again, he's in the film, and I watched him, and I had a chance to meet him the other night, and somebody, I think Aaron Taylor, was also a part of that panel the other night, and he was talking about the fact of how many handouts there are when you're in the NFL, and Marcellus was shaking his head, agreeing with him, very, very strongly agreeing. Yes, there's a lot of people asking for handouts. I know the film shows this too, but that definitely had an effect on Junior's life, didn't it?
It did, and that was a hard part to include in the film because we talk about his siblings and his parents and the expectations that they had on Junior when he came into money to support them. And, it's not a nice story to tell, but unfortunately it's a fairly common story among athletes and entertainers who come from humble beginnings and then come into money. The expectations from family members and friends is just, it's so unexpected and in some ways so unreasonable, but each one thinks, well, he's so rich now, this little money that I'm asking for is nothing. But when you start to multiply that by dozens and dozens and spread out over years and years, it's a lot of money. And Junior was always so happy to do it early on. He bought his family a house, the cars and everything, and his parents still live in that house. Some of his siblings still do. But by the end, he was just out of money. He didn't have any more. And I think that the reason we included it in the film is that coupled with the other pressures in his life, I think it's reasonable to say was a component to what happened because, he was looking ahead. And again, I'm speculating, but he was looking ahead to a world where he was going to have to tell people, I don't have any money anymore. I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy or whatever. We're going to have to sell this house. You're going to have to, and I think that was going to be so humiliating for him, and he just couldn't imagine that. That's my speculation, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, and so much came out afterwards, that was really sad. Again, for me growing up, and I mean, even 2000. Not long before he died, I lived a mile and a half from the man, and would drive by on beautiful days because he lived right across the street from the ocean. You could throw a wiffle ball in the water from his balcony, and I'd drive by and see him out there, and he was such a personable guy. And an old student football player of mine would be out there surfing, and they'd sit there and talk football and life for a while they're just out surfing. And so here you think this guy's got it all together. He sailed off into retirement, and then later you find out about, the casinos calling for their money and the failure of the restaurant. And it's very sad, which kind of leads into the part about, CTE. And I think, Kirby, that you did a phenomenal job of telling his story. As you said earlier on this call here, it's Junior's story. But the before and after picture of this man is so clear that he was this family man who, he came home. There's tremendous video of him with his younger kids, with his football pads on at home, playing with his kids, and the smiles and the laughter at family. And then, you highlight the career, and his kids are a part of that when they're young. And then, it goes through documenting kind of the times when he's getting a little older in the career and going through some injuries and retirement. And then you get to the post-NFL life when he really started to change. Do you think that – well, let me ask this. I think that the really hard thing right now in the football world and the medical world is these guys, their whole world comes crashing to an end when they retire. Some guys don't deal with that very well, right? Some guys have a really hard time. They struggle from, depression, or they get hooked on drugs or alcohol. And I'm trying to help figure out, when you have a guy like Junior who kills himself and then CTE is found in that brain, is that the brain disease that ultimately led him to kill himself, or is that all the rest of the struggles like you mentioned earlier? I think you talked about this. Yeah, I think you talked about this wonderfully the other night. If you could hit on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, my short answer is it's complicated. I think that it's fair to say that what we know about CTE, which is still not a huge amount. I mean, we're learning about CTE, and the more we learn, I think the scarier it is. But I think it's fair to say that CTE, the impact it has on people is it contributes to depression. It contributes to, inconsistent behavior, violent swings, mood swings, irresponsible, use of money, difficulties with relationships. To me, the best way to put it is I think that the normal problems people have in life, and we all face issues, I think CTE makes those more difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And you mentioned when players leave the NFL, that is one of the roughest transitions, and it's not just the NFL, but it's one of the roughest transitions there is, because these guys, for decades, since they were, middle school, high school at the latest, then through college, then through their pro careers, they've basically had their lives planned out for them, scheduled for them. They've had a built-in group of close friends, their teammates. They've had this activity that provides such a rush, because when you run out on that field and the crowd is yelling for you, and you're working with your band of brothers for this common goal, you don't always get there, but when you do, there's no feeling like it in the world. And anyone, I mean, I'm only speaking from experience of playing for a crappy little high school team. I can't imagine what it's like for these guys who make it to the NFL, and they all talk about that incredible high. Now, when that's the NFL player who leaves on his own terms is extremely rare. Virtually everybody, they leave before they want to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
In a way that they don't want to, and suddenly it's gone, and you don't want it to be gone yet, and so you've got all that camaraderie that's gone. You've got the structure in your life that's gone. Your money's not coming in anymore, and you may not. A lot of these guys don't have any purpose in life anymore. They maybe they did, or maybe they didn't. Okay, all that to say, that's hard to take. That's hard to deal with for anybody
without any kind of brain issue. Yeah,
exactly. Anybody who's got a healthy mental state, that's still really hard. Now, if your brain's not working right, it's a recipe for disaster. So,
yeah.
This film I see as a cautionary tale. We don't know yet precisely what percentage of players get CTE because of football. Even those who get it, we don't know precisely what percentage of them it's going to impact in a really negative way. That's going to get sorted out over the next, number of years, and we may never know precisely how it works. But I think it's fair to say that it affects a significant number of players now in a negative way. So, yes, this is a cautionary tale. Hey, this is what football can do to you. I love football. It's my favorite sport. I just spent the whole afternoon watching it. But I watch it differently now.
Yeah.
I saw, a player today just helmet to hit, just went out cold. And, what does the future hold for him? I don't know. But I think what the players would say is they just want to be informed. I think their gripe is that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, during the time Junior was playing, nobody was, certainly not the league, but nobody was telling them what the science was. And so they weren't even given any information on which to make decisions whether to play or not. Now, at least, there's some information out there. And you're seeing, a small handful of players Chris Borland and the likes of him, who just decide to walk away. I don't think that's ever going to be a huge number, but, we'll see how things change as we get more information.
Yeah, I think you're right about a lot of what you just said. I think it is a cautionary tale. And, out here in California, it's a really long story. I'm not going to get into it, but, lawmaker, not into it too too deep here. We want to wrap up this phone call. But, lawmakers were trying to outlaw youth football out here, and I became a vocal part of that and helped to put together some folks, and we led a grassroots movement that defeated that before it ever got a vote here, before it was ever heard in the assembly, and that's the only state that's happened in. And I think, my main reasoning for that, like you said, we just don't know enough about it. Should the government start legislating something we don't know enough about? As you said, there's no doubt that the disease is affecting the way people deal with life. And I think that's what your film really pointed out. I know Gary Plummer, another former linebacker, he made a statement like that made a lot of sense. CTE did not kill him, but CTE made it more difficult for Junior to deal with life. Kirby, I think, and this is not to be critical, because I think it's a fair discussion out there. My son who's 11, he's never played tackle football. One of the first things he said to me in the car after the movie, when I asked him how he liked it, he said, "Man, Dad, it was awesome, and I wish I was alive to watch him play and got to meet him like you did." But then the next thing he said was, "Dad, I don't know if I want to play football now." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it's really scary what happened to him." And, again, he's only 11. He's never played tackle football. I really think parents will watch this and not let their kids play. I think you're going to have maybe some high school, maybe some college students. Kirby, I wouldn't be surprised if we see one or two NFL players watch this and say, "You know what? That Seaus movie really made me evaluate my career and my future." What do you think? I know, Kirby, I know through getting to know you, I know you didn't make this movie to take down football. I know without a doubt that was nothing near why you made this. But what do you think about that whole idea that this is probably going to take football away from people?
Well, that's sobering. But I think football is so big that the sport isn't going to go away, and there are still going to be plenty of participants in it.
Yeah.
But I think it's also true that as we learn more about CTE and we can draw a closer connection to these things that happen 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the road, yes, there will be more players who just decide it's not worth the risk, or there will be parents who decide it's not worth the risk to let their son engage in tackle football. And to me, I have no issue with that, because that's just based on information. And the sport it has risks. We've known for years and years that it's, most NFL players when they're 50 are going to be semi-cripples. That's always been on the table. This is an extension of that. It's just knowledge about what happens to you when you engage in this. And let me point out, it's not just football.
Sure.
This is happening in hockey, in
fair
soccer,
point. Yep.
In boxing, obviously, and other contact sports. They're all facing the same thing. There's some studies that show that football might not even, have the highest rate of brain injury. I don't think those studies are really conclusive yet, but the point is that it's not just football. We're focusing on football because it's the biggest game in the States, and Junior was the most famous player to have this happen. But it's contact sports in general, and people used to react to concussions in a way that was just, it was kind of a funny thing. You got your bell rung and you got knocked out, and that's funny. Well, now I think the tide has turned on that, and there's a shift, which is good. But we still don't know. But I think it's fair to say there's more risk there than we realized. And if somebody chooses not to play football because of that, I have no issue. I don't apologize for doing that.
Yeah.
Again, I love the game, and I'm going to keep watching it.
Yeah.
To me, it's just like everything in life. The more information you have to make your decisions, the better off we all are. Absolutely.
Talking about those hits, there is one hit in that movie where the whole audience the other night just went, it took the breath away because it looked so scary. And I think 20 years ago, it would have been a whole different response. You know, it would have been more of a cheer.
Sure.
Yeah. So it is interesting. I was telling my son, you know, I said, son, one of the things about these CTE studies and where I'm critical of it, until we see them take, 50 brains of former players and 50 brains of former non-players, and they find CTE in 45 of 50 here, and they find CTE in only 3 out of 50 who didn't play, boy, now we have a really, really big issue on our hands, But they haven't had that control group. Again, that's a whole nother podcast. Kirby, I appreciate your time. Let me ask you this to wrap things up. What was your favorite part of making this movie about Junior Seau?
Without question, just meeting the players who, lived life with him on the same team and hearing them talk about what kind of a teammate he was. Because, again, that's what attracted me to Junior in the first place. But he just loved it so much. And he wanted everyone on that team to love the game as much as he did. And the way he made them feel, and the way he made them all better players just by leading by example. That's so rare. And it just came through so clearly. Every player I talked to who spent time with him, it was the same thing. So I knew it was all true. So that, without a question, just seeing that and hearing that was a joy.
Awesome. And what's next? Do you take a little bit of a breather, take a vacation, or you get right back to working on something else?
I will take a breather, but I've got some other projects that I don't want to jinx it because nothing is sure yet. But
gotcha.
Hopefully you'll see me again soon, I hope.
Awesome. Well, Kirby, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the Coach's Locker podcast.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for helping out with the film. You were fantastic, and I hope everybody goes to ESPN Plus and watches the film. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, we're back here with Coach Lamont Butler from Trinity International University, head coach out there. We've been following his season, his first year as a head coach. Coach, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, man, I'm doing well out here in Southern California. Coach, what's the weather in Chicago like here on September 16th?
Oh, it's about 90 degrees.
Oh, okay. That's 90 degrees, a little muggy, right?
Yeah, humid. Humid.
A little humid out there. All right. So, Coach, before we get into talking about yesterday's game and kind of your week looking back, I noticed on the schedule, I knew you guys won a game, and then when I was doing a little research on yesterday's game, I saw the overall record listed at 0-4, and I said, no, that's wrong. These guys have won. Coach Butler won his first game as a head coach at the college level. And then I looked on the schedule on your website here, and it says loss 0-1. That should be 0-2, I think. I don't know. I thought a forfeit was 2 points. I might be wrong, but it says that you guys had to forfeit your first game. Researched that a little bit on my end and saw that it seems like it was a kind of a paperwork technicality on a kid with some credits. Do I understand that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you get news, word comes down to you, I'm sure from your athletic director or maybe an administrator there at the university. Hey, Coach, we have to end up forfeiting this game. How do you go about dealing with that, both, as personally as a head coach, you get that news, and then the second part of the question is how do you tell your team and your staff about that? How did you deal with that this week?
Yeah, so first of all, you want to find out what happened and where the issue was, the breakdown in communication. And so we, went through those channels and, find out everything that happened and what constituted it. And then, meeting with the guys, obviously they were, upset because, we won the game and they felt that, it was something that, they earned and, for them, take nothing away from them and then just telling them you got to control what you can control. And obviously for them, it's out of their control and there's nothing that they can, there's nothing that they can do to change the situation or, what happened. So we got to continue to get better and continue to, focus on the task at hand. And then, that's all for me to, worry about and try to take care of. So, obviously guys are upset about it, but, in life, there's going to be a lot bigger things that happen to them at a forfeited game. And so try to keep that in the, take that into perspective and then, move forward from there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I know, you guys are a Christian university there, and I know that, part of your mission as a person is to build better men. So it sounds like you kind of did. You kind of related that to life a little bit, talked about the fact that sometimes we just can't control things that happens, right?
Yep.
How did your team respond to that, Coach? As far, once you, obviously they're going to be upset, they're going to be bitter, but then, you walk them through that process in a meeting or what have you. How did they respond to that once you, tried walking them through that a little bit?
I think they responded well. I think, just from once, obviously once they got it, they were hurt and then they were upset about it. But then we turned the page and, guys are focused and, back to working on our next opponent.
Yeah, so the next opponent you guys play, man, Coach, you guys are playing some very good football teams. You played Taylor, Taylor University last night or yesterday, 1 o'clock yesterday. Home game, right? Second home game of the year.
Yep.
And you guys lost that 50-13. Coach, walk us through that game a little bit.
Man, so this was the best week of practice we had, and so I was really, really optimistic about the game. I felt we were in a good place mentally. Our guys are getting stuff, and our younger guys started to grow up a little bit. And so I was like, all right, perfect. And I was telling our O-line coach about that as well. And then we get to Saturday, and then we had some issues earlier in the morning with meetings and things like that. And that kind of threw off the entire day in terms of, what you expect, and, a team being ready to play, a team being focused, those things shouldn't occur, shouldn't happen. And I think, that kind of constituted to a little bit of it. And so, started out the game really well. We got second play of the game. They fumbled the ball. We recovered it inside their red zone. I think it was 3 or 4 plays. We went down and we scored 7-0. And then the next series, I think they went down and scored. And then the series after that, I think it was the first or second play. We fumbled the ball. They pick it up. And they pick it up, take it in for a touchdown. And then they go for a 2-point conversion. So they're up 15-7. And then we got into the red zone a lot. We moved the ball well offensively. We just didn't finish drives. And then defensively, there were drives where we were on fire, had really, really got some stops. But then there were some drives where we looked bad and feeling sorry for ourselves because of some of the things that happened. And then, we gave up touchdowns. So, we lost the turnover battle. We were, I think it was like 3-1, 4-1, something like that. So that's a tough, you got 4 turnovers, it's going to be tough. And then, we were down 28-13 at halftime. And, still in a good spot. We get the ball back and we're moving the ball well. So it's like, all right, we can get this thing within, 1 score. Coming back out of halftime. And then first play of the second half, throw a pick 6.
Oh, and, gosh.
Yeah. So, so that's when, when it rains, it pours.
Yeah, the wheels kind of start coming off a little bit once that hope coming out of halftime. All of a sudden, you start that way. It's like, oh, here we go, digging our own hole again. Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow there, Coach. Coming off of, it's almost like you got kicked when you were down, having to forfeit, and then coming out with another loss there. So, What's the mood of the team? You haven't met with them today yet, right? Sunday?
No, we'll meet at 6:15 tonight.
Meet tonight.
I think my big thing for them, and like our effort was outstanding in the game. I can't praise them enough for that.
Good.
It's just those little things that are going to keep us in bad situations. Where like you see the film, like maybe a guy doesn't wrong arm, or a receiver doesn't run the right route, or quarterback doesn't make the right read, and so we have to clean those little things up if we're going to be successful. Effort. I mean, that was probably one of the best games that we've played effort-wise all year. Just how hard we played, which I was happy about that. But mentally and football-wise, we got to figure some things out in terms of doing the right thing consistently. So.
Yeah. Coach, take us. One thing I keep meaning to ask you each week is, kind of take us through your week. We got 6 or 7 minutes here left with you, and I appreciate your time again. So Sunday you bring them in. You have a meeting tonight. What does Monday look like for the team?
So Monday we'll have another team meeting. So Sunday's all about the game, reviewing the game, and talking about that. And then Monday we'll come in. We'll have a team meeting at 3:15. As coaches, we're game planning. So the week before, on Thursday, we'll do all of our input stuff on the huddle. And then Sunday, we'll have a little bit of time. We'll have an hour to, kind of go over. As coaches, we'll look at the other team while the offense is meeting for defenses lifting, So the defensive staff has a little bit of time. Offensive staff has a little bit of time to kind of, talk through some of the base stuff that they see. And then Monday, we spend basically all day game planning as well. And then 3:15, we'll have a team meeting. And it's basically our introduction to our next opponent. Then we'll go over special teams, and then we'll go into our position groups. And then after we meet with our position groups, then we'll go out and we'll have an hour practice, basically going over special teams, and then working over all the base stuff that their offense does. Tuesday and Wednesday are pretty similar. We'll go over different situations. So on Tuesday, it's first, second, and third down. Wednesday is red zone goal line area. And then Thursday, our guys actually have off. So we don't practice on Thursdays. Our guys have options. They can come in and watch film if they want. But us as coaches, we're still working in the office. And then on Friday, we have our jog-through practice, our pregame jog-through practice, getting ready for the game. And then Saturday is game day. If we play away, depending on how far it is, so I know we've had 2 overnights so far this year. Friday would be a travel day. And then once we get to the area where we're playing, then we'll have a practice somewhere. And then Friday night, chill out at the hotel, and then Saturday game day.
So Thursday day off. Why Thursday, Coach?
It gives them a chance just to, just grinding throughout the entire week. And then also having them come in on Sunday, they don't really get kind of a day to themselves. And so Thursday's a day kind of where they can relax and, kind of get, they had 2 practices during the week where, they're pretty much contact. And so they get a little bit of time to rest right before the game.
Yeah, and that's was that something you inherited, or is that a schedule that you kind of created?
So it was I know a few coaches, around college football who do it like that. Also, our offensive coordinator school he came from, he did it like that as well.
Huh.
And my big thing was trying to get our guys to, trying to get them some sleep during the day. And so, I shouldn't say during the day, but, getting a full night's rest of sleep and everything. And not having to get them up early in the morning at 6 a.m. for meetings or, things like that. And then our red shirts and our freshmen, I forgot to mention that, they'll lift Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, two mornings, so 2 6 a.m.s. Then they have an afternoon lift on Thursday. And then our travel squad or our guys who play in the games, they'll lift Sunday and Monday nights. Okay.
Do you see that is it hard to get them back focused going a little bit on Fridays, or is that just not an issue?
No, I don't think it's an issue. I think our guys, they come back refreshed and, they have a day off from football. And so, obviously during the season, you kind of want to be, out there playing football or practicing football. And so I think you kind of see, they're refreshed to get a day off, and then they're coming back and they're excited because it is football. And, they haven't been around it for a day. And so now they get a chance to come back to it and work. So I don't think we've had an issue with guys on a Friday, like having to get them going.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I've only spent 1 year at the college level. That's JC, and our kids just had Sundays off, the day after the game. I don't know if that's a rule out here. I really don't know if they're allowed to meet or not. But I really like that idea of giving them off Thursdays, and like you said, they get to get their feet back under them a little, get a little break. I really like that effect right there. That sounds. I know when I was at the high school level, 8 years as a head coach, about 4 of those, we would bring them in on Saturday. Go through a little bit of a recovery workout and then do film. Boy, if I were a head coach again, I might really study up on that. Maybe a good practice Saturday looking forward and give them off middle of the week. I don't think anybody does that, but at the high school level, I'd be curious to see how that might play out. So, Well, Coach, you guys coming up now, you've got you're going to be on. No, you're at home again. Now you're going into a bye week, Coach. So what are your goals during the bye week as we wrap up today's call?
Our goals will be to get healthy. So any guys that are banged up or are injured, try to get them right, get them back. And then the big thing would be developing our younger guys, trying to get them up to speed. And then also just fundamentals, getting back to those, and looking forward to, these will kind of be more like camp practices where it'll be more indie and trying to get our guys back and understanding, the whole thing. And, during the season it's kind of tough because you're trying to put scheme in and, but you always have to make sure you're working on those fundamentals. And sometimes it can get sloppy just because you haven't, you might not have been focusing on it all along, or you're now you can really, really hammer it in. And, so just getting our guys back to that. And then, trying to fix some of the things that we need to fix, and making sure everybody knows what they need to do and where they need to be at.
Are there rules as far as, what you're allowed to wear, what equipment you're allowed to use during the bye week for you guys?
No.
Okay. And so will you keep that same schedule this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, or do you give them off a day or two?
No, they'll have Thursday through Sunday off.
Okay, so they'll get a good little chunk there.
Yeah, they'll get about 4 days, and then we'll come back next Monday, ready to go.
How about you guys as coaches? What are you guys going to take a break a little bit this week at all?
Nope. So we'll be.
I like that laugh.
We'll be. We'll obviously have our practices Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday will be big recruiting days for us. So we'll get out to some games on Friday. Thursday we'll figure out, more about our big board and, stuff like that, and kind of see where guys are at in recruiting. And, this time allows us now, the bye week, we get to do a little bit more recruiting because we're not doing as much game planning. Now, obviously, we're still gonna prepare for our next opponent. But we got a little bit of time. It doesn't have to be as rapid as it would be if we were playing this week. So we'll definitely watch watch their film, and we'll practice some of their stuff this week as well. But we're gonna try to get our guys healthy, and then for us as coaches, we're gonna recruit.
All right, Coach. Well, hey, good luck with that extra week to prepare, get some guys healthy, do a little more recruiting. And, again, we really appreciate your time. Follow Coach Butler on Twitter. Coach Butler on Twitter, you can catch him at Coach Butler, Butler. That's at Coach Butler, TIU. Follow him, hook up with him. NAI school in Chicago. He's always looking for football players. And hit him up there. And again, make sure to follow Coach Butler. If you haven't followed the story on him as we've followed along here, this is Coach's first year as a head coach at the NAI college level. You can check back, follow our discussions with him. We hit up about 15, 18 minutes a week here, following him throughout the season. So, Coach, we will not chat next Sunday since you're on the bye week, but we'll hook up in a couple weeks from today and check in with you again. Coach, have a great week.
You too.
Folks, that's it. That wraps up episode 17 of the Coach's Locker podcast. Thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed that. Hey, follow Coach Butler at Coach Butler, Butler, TIU on Twitter. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if Kirby Bradley's on there or not. But I hope you check out the film Seaus. It's on ESPN Plus. I think it might move to ESPN one day. I'm not sure. And so, kind of a sobering discussion there about the life and death of Junior Seau. But I hope you enjoyed that insight. I was really intrigued by some of, how they go about making these movies, and it's obviously out of my ballpark of being a coach and an educator. So that was really interesting. And again, thank you for checking us out again. My podcast home at 8laces.org/podcast. Again, 8EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. And you can find a whole slew of other football coaches doing some tremendous podcasts at footballcoachingpodcast.com. Get show notes, find all my shows there, 8laces.org/podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Fore, at COACHFORE. Thank you for listening.